Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Professor Tom Smith. He's a professor in finance from Macquarie University in Australia. He is one of the leading finance academics in Australia and New Zealand by both of the Journal of Financial Literature and Pacific Basin Finance Journal. He's also the leading researchers in environmental finance, asset pricing theory and test, design of market microstructure, and derivative. And today he's with us to deliver the workshop, Mastering the Mixed Method Research, Strategy and Application. So without further ado, please, everyone, please join me in welcoming Professor Tom Smith.
So thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving up your time to spend half a day with us. I hope you get a lot out of it. I especially want to thank Duke and all of the helpers and the Danang University for hosting us. So as I go to different research methodologies, I'm going to write on the board what page of the online notes it comes from. So you should have a copy of the online version of this book. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll indicate where we're starting so you don't get lost, right? And you don't have to take notes. So we're going to talk about qualitative research, and you might think if you're an empirical, quantitative researcher, you might think, well, qualitative research is really easy. You just go and talk to people. How hard can that be? But I think you're going to find here this morning that it's far more rigorous and demanding than being, say, a capital markets researcher that's looking at data, right? So this is more time consuming and more demanding and more rigorous. So why does qualitative research have a place in business? Well, you'll see I wrote a book just last year on qualitative research, and the foreword to the book was written by ex-editors of the Journal of Finance, which is the top finance journal, and ex-presidents of the American Finance Association. And they're saying that the book represents a line in the sand. The only way you can get at investors' expectations is by doing qualitative research. And these people have actually started doing qualitative research themselves. I think the topic they were looking at was culture. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how rigorous and demanding it is, give you some examples, and encourage you to catch the wave, right? So it's really just hitting the mainstream. So the approach is always going to be, when we do a new methodology, what's the current state of the art? Yeah, what the editors are looking for, what's some great examples, and where to from here. So we have a weekly seminar at my university, and I really like when the speaker starts off the seminar by saying that the research, which is normally quantitative, was motivated by talking to a CEO or a CFO or a market maker or a financial planner, right? Because it's got a real world application. The only trouble is that they probably should have spoken to quite a few of them and written a qualitative paper first, right, before they started doing their empirical paper, their quantitative paper, because they might have got a lot more insights that they could have tested. So a scientist looks at us in the social science, and if we're only doing quantitative research, looking at prices and volumes, they'd say, well, you're trying to get at the deep meaning behind these things, but you can actually ask the CFO, the market maker, the financial planner, right? The scientists can't do that. They can't talk to the atoms or the molecules. They can't say, is there something lying there beneath you, like a Higgs boson? They can't. They just got to do the quantitative, right? So they would think, they think we're very silly if we don't actually go and talk to the market participants, because that's a luxury they don't have. Now, in That was a full qualitative study. Incidentally, Lintner is the same Lintner as you hear about in the Sharp Lintner capital asset pricing model, for which Sharp got a Nobel Prize. Now, Lintner would have got a Nobel Prize too, but he had died, right? He had died prior to the prize being awarded. And they don't give the Nobel Prize to someone who has died. Otherwise, there's a guy called Archimedes from history that would get it every year because he was so good. So you're going to see that qualitative research, and in the modern state of the art, is very formal and rigorous. And even the president of the American Finance Association and the editor of the Journal of Finance would find it hard to to meet the standards. So, for example, some of these top researchers try to predict returns, right? And generally, they report 5 variables that seem very good at predicting returns with an R squared around 20. What though, if they were qualitative researchers, they would be forced to keep memos of every variable they tried and didn't work and they discarded. So imagine if you had to write down, like you tried 100,000 variables and none of them worked, just these 5, right? So that would, you'd be severely embarrassed if you're a quantitative researcher, right? Because obviously the normal statistical tests don't apply if you're picking the best 5 out of 1,000. That's like many hundreds of millions of combinations, right? So you'd have to divide your significant levels by the number of comparisons, right? Which you'd never satisfy that. So first of all, what is qualitative research versus quantitative research? So qualitative research is primarily doing interviews, one-on-one interviews. It can also be focus groups, so where you get a group of people together, and can be observations, right? I observed everyone coming in here today, right? At 8 o'clock, we barely had enough people, but just, in the few minutes after, look, we've got a full room. My church in Sydney, it's all young families. So when the church starts, there's only, 50 people in the church. But by the time it finishes, because, it's hard to get a young family and children together, there's 700 people there, right? So it's very interesting. You can do research, qualitative research, by just doing observations. So it does not include surveys and questionnaires, right? That's regarded as quantitative research, right? So a lot of capital market people, when they think of qualitative, they think of surveys, but it's not. You ask questions, you get data, and you run statistical tests, right? It's quantitative. So some people, especially from in my field, finance, they say, but we trust the data, the prices and volume. What about people lied to you, right? What if people lie to you? Well, of course, we're very aware that people mightn't be telling you the truth, right? So that's why there's a scientific procedure, right? There's a procedure called data triangulation, or just triangulation in general, that seeks to verify the data. So when you arrange an interview with someone, it's always a good idea to get them to agree women to break the glass ceiling. They might say fantastic things in the interview, but you see the male manager being disrespectful to the PA outside, right, before you go into the interview. So those observations are important. So data triangulation is you don't necessarily believe what they say, but you can type up the transcript afterwards, what they say. You also make observations, and then you also look at documents, any document. So You go to you're talking to the bank about, whether they, are treating their customers fairly. And it all sounds fantastic, right? And the body language is fantastic. They're looking you in the eye. But then you go and look at documents, right? And you see that this bank has been involved in 600 million money laundering offences and been fined 1.5 billion. You see that not just this bank, but a whole lot of banks have been subject to a royal commission, with charging fees to people who had died or children, right? So, what they say and how they acted, they were like, very good con people, but the documents tell you a completely different story. This has happened in Australia. So that's data triangulation, and the triangulation really makes it the research replicable. So another researcher talking to the same class of people will come up with the same themes and conclusions. The other sort of triangulation is participant triangulation. So you might be investigating a financial disaster. Yeah, a lot of people invested in a specific scheme that was offering interest rates, a couple of percent above, what you could get elsewhere, and somehow or other, the scheme goes belly up and everyone loses their money. So, it's obvious you go and talk to the investors, right? But it's probably a good idea to triangulate on the participants. Also talk to the financial planner. And of course, the investor blames the financial planner, but you might get a very different story from the financial planner. And the third group of people you can talk to are the regulators, who probably get blamed for allowing this financial disaster to happen. But here you get the 3 points of view, right? The investor, the regulator, and the financial planner. And you see all sides of the story. Yeah. So I just love a movie or a book where it's the same situation, but each different chapter gives you a different person's point of view. And we'll come to that later about whether there's one hard and fast reality, or whether at the other extreme, we all face a different reality. Yeah. And the other form of triangulation is researcher triangulation. Yeah. So we might triangulate on the research question, exactly what research question we're looking at. Qualitative normally doesn't have hypotheses, but you've got to have a research question, right? So we decide on the research question and we're looking for the deep underlying meaning about this research question. So then a good idea is to, every question you ask in the interview should be tied to one or more of your research questions. Then once you've got the transcript and you've got your memos on observations and documents and all your other memos, then you've got to come up with the themes. So you've got a number of research looking at it. They'd all go through individually, all the transcripts, and all the notes, and they'd come up with initial themes, and intermediate themes where you group a few of the initial themes, and finally you come up around. So in addition to the triangulation we saw, the data triangulation, the participant triangulation, and the researcher triangulation, you have to keep memos, right? So that's where you would write down all the variables you tried in predicting returns that failed. And that, weren't we recording before? Do I have to start again? No. Okay. So the memos are very important. So the methods memo, right? So in the methods memo, you might have asked, the participant characteristics up front. How old are you? What do you weigh? What health problems you got, right? Well, people don't like being asked those things, don't ask a person their age or weights, always use ranges. So they might just stop right there and then, right, and go. So we might have started off the interview by getting that information out of the way. And so you would have a methods memo and saying, this isn't working. I'm going to switch that information, gathering to the end. I'm going to ask the questions about the research questions up front, and I'm only going to, get that biographic information on the participant at the end, because that will work better. Because if they say at the end, I'm not going to tell you my age, weight, and health problems, at least you've got the responses to the research questions, yeah? So that's the sort of thing for a methods memo. The other is reflections. Well, after a couple of interviews, you might see, I can already see some themes, right? And you might write down what themes they have in common. So you might write that down, and that's your reflections. And then, analytic, you might talk about how, you're shifting between deductive, where you have a general principle, and you deduce down to, a specific application, or inductive, where you see something specific and then generalize, right? So you might have analytic memos as well. In qualitative research,
First, let's read again. Online can you?
You can turn the volume off.
Yes, can you? Next week.
Okay, are we ready? Okay.
Tắt tay luôn hả?
Online can hear?
Cho Ngọc Hiệp in here too.
Online can hear? Someone said something. Chat, check the chat. You've got the audio turned off here.
Yeah, so that's what he asked.
Okay.
You have to
Turn it back on.
No, turn off. That's not the thing. That's what he said.
But we've got to have it on for them to hear.
He
Right.
on here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. A good talk.
Okay. Okay, so sampling, right? Because it's so hard to get participants and to arrange the meetings, even on Zoom, right? It's hard because the people you want to interview are probably going to be high profile people, so it's hard to get their time. The samples for qualitative are normally 30, 50, 70 in that range, right? Whereas the quantitative people look down on that and say, well, but we have millions of intraday observations, right? Hundreds of millions. But that's fine. It's just the nature of what you're doing, right? So you're trying to get at the deep meaning underneath what people are doing, right? And you'll find, once you get to 50 or so, you start to get a saturation. You record all the themes from each of the interviews, but it's going up and up, more and more themes, but you'll find you're not adding any more themes, right, as you get to like 50 odd people or wherever it is. So, it also doesn't make any sense to go out and do a random sample, because if you go out, you want to study financial disaster and you go out and do a random sample, well, the people you find, from the telephone book, most of them aren't going to be involved in a financial disaster, right? So it actually makes sense to go and talk to the people, investors that lost their money, the financial advisors that advise them, and the regulators. It's purposeful. And so it says to unmute my microphone, but I don't do that. You sure they can hear me? Okay. So the sampling for quantitative research, for like capital market studies, is not random anyway, right? They go, if they're studying takeovers, they only look at firms involved in a takeover. So again, that's purposeful sampling. Yeah. So in quantitative research, you rarely see a classic random sample. So doing the interview, you think to yourself, well, I've been talking to people all my life. I'm going to be fine doing this, right? But it's a lot harder than you think, right? So some interviewing tips. Before we start that, I'll tell you that I have a theory that if people's job is the same as their vocation, that they're going to be really happy people. So it seems like a very straightforward. If your vocation in life, maybe to be a teacher, matches your job, then you're, a really happy. And so my vocation is to teach people how to do research, and that's my job. So I'm probably the happiest person you've met. But there's really no way I can design a qualitative study to confirm or to get information on that. because I would have to add, ask leading questions. Yeah? I would have to lead you to try and say that. And when you didn't, bite into that, I'd have to go hunting for the answers I want. And I can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You've got to ask the questions, the same question you're asking every participant, and you've got to let the participant speak, because we're trying to find out what the participants do. I've got a bit of echo. Are you hearing the echo? I've got a bit of an echo coming. You say something and then you hear it again. Okay. So since you're there talking to a live person, it's silly to ask yes or no questions. Yeah. So it might be because you're so close to and you're logged in. So dichotomous questions, which are yes or no, it's silly to ask them in an interview because you can get a lot more. And you've got to avoid questions with hidden meaning. So I can ask a question about your education in a couple of ways, right? I can say, how much are you prepared to invest in your education? Yeah. And I think I'd get a positive response, right? Or I could ask, how much debt are you prepared to take on to fund your education? I think I'd get a different answer, right? But to someone looking at the question, not thinking about the fact that words have hidden meaning, or some words are loaded, will think, oh, well, you're just asking the same question. But the use of the word invest, which is positive, will, I think, give you a different result from the word debt, which has got negative. So this is what the interviews are looking for, right? They want to know what your research question, they want you to be very clear about it. And then for every question you ask, they want it tied back to the relevant interview question. So they want to see a table like this. It shows that, what you're doing is very rigorous. Then they want, remember I talked about the researcher triangulation. They want to see the iteration of the analysis. They want to be part, they want to be part of what you did. So you read through the 50, 70 transcripts, right? And now you have a bunch of initial themes, might be 30 or 40 of them. So you come up with them, another researcher comes up with them, you compare notes, you go back, and you get to a consensus. So then you think, well, maybe I can combine these 5 or 6 into one overriding theme. So you do that and you come up with the intermediate themes, and you might have 10 or 12, right? So the other researcher does it too, and you see whether the same 10 or 12. If not, you iterate again. So then you might pull some of those together and come up with final themes, 3 or 4. The other researcher does the same, and you compare notes and iterate, right? So they like to see that. They also like to see some quotes from the participants, but you've got to be careful here, right? If you give too many quotes, then you've got, a big book, like this. Yeah? So that's not going to get published. If you have too little quotes, then there's not enough that the editor, the reviewer, and the reader they don't feel like they've been along for the ride, right? So you've got to, not too much, not too little, you've got to get it just right. So the editor, the reviewer, and the reader feel part of it and feel, oh yeah, I would have come up with those final themes or something close to it. So that's called the Goldilocks effect. Not too much, not too little, just right. So that's very important, and we'll give you an example of that in the next. So you see here is the initial themes down the bottom. Then they've been combined, some of them, to get the intermediate themes, and finally is a couple of final themes. Now, I would have done the order differently. I would have had the initial themes on the top, then the intermediate, then the final. I tend to read top to bottom, but this is the way that this editor said they'd like to see it, but they want to see this, and they want to see some quotes. So, so researcher triangulation is really important there. So how do you, come up with these initial themes, right? So I've written down the bottom, scissors and sort, so you can have all of the transcripts and you can cut out themes that are common from each interview and do a big pile, right? So that might be one of your main themes, and then the next theme is the pile's not so high, and so on until your pile is quite low. So you can do that, but then you're taking up a big part of your desk, and if someone wants to clean your desk, they've got trouble, or if someone leaves the window open, it'll all blow away. So instead of doing scissors and sort, you can use some qualitative data analysis software, right? And I talked about Leximancer that UQ has licensed, but there's also in Victoria they have something called NVivo, which I think it's in its 15th year now. And I think if you're only going to do one qualitative study in your whole life, the scissors and sort is fine. If you want to do a lot of these, you think you've got to do a lot, then it's probably worthwhile investing in qualitative data analysis software, right? Your choice. At the moment, it essentially does the same as scissors and sort, except it's on the computer. You highlight the themes, but you've just got the pile is in the computer rather than on your desk. Now, of course, I'm sure the Leximancer will have an AI-enabled version very soon. It's already close to that. It uses big data, and I'm sure that all the qualitative data analysis software will have an AI feature. Don't trust that completely. You still have to do your research triangulation. Just think of the AI as another researcher, right? And don't take what it comes up with as gospel, because you'll compare notes. So the final thing that the editors like to see is a matrix where for each of your findings, you give the source. So was the source an interview? Was it a focus group? Was it the documents? Was it the methods memo, the analytics memo, or the reflection memo, right? So you see that finding number one has got quite a few sources to reinforce it. And finding number four has only got three sources to verify it. So you sort of see the strength of the finding by what source it comes from. Now, that's not an F test, right? But an editor, particularly of a quantitative journal or a journal that's more prone towards quantitative, would like that. First of all, it's a matrix, and they love matrices. And secondly, it's sort of telling them which are the most important, which has the most support from your sources. So the elephant in the room is, sort of how you look at life, right? So on the left-hand side, and this is talking about theoretical orientation, what is the world? What is truth? So in my field, up until recently, empirical finance, they have thought that there's only one absolute truth, right? And we're trying to get at the truth. Never mind, truth keeps changing as scientists come up with bigger and bigger theory, right? Whatever was the truth all of a sudden changes. So as you go across from the left to the right, you're allowing for the possibility that different versions of reality exist, right? And so it doesn't have to be a metaverse with different parallel universes. It's just that you see the world differently, right? And on the far right-hand side is everyone is in a different world, right? Everyone has their own version of reality, yeah? So which is closer to the truth? Well, I'll tell you what the police think, right? Say there's been a crime or an accident. The police love it when there's one witness. They love it, right? The witness gets up in court, gives a very confident rendition of what's happened. What about if there's 3 or 4 witnesses? Well, the police hate it, right? Because when they get up in court, they've all seen different things, right? They have actually seen, they're the honest people, but what they saw is not the same as what the other 3 people saw. And so the defense attorney, right, highlights all the inconsistencies, and the jury just throws out all the testimony, and the criminal walks free, right? So oftentimes when there's a lot of witnesses to a crime, the police don't even prosecute it, right? They go, oh no, we can't win this. Yeah? So that really leaves you thinking, right? We all see different. When you walk into a room, right, there's chairs and couches and all things, right, and a stage. If we stopped and took in every single thing, it would take us ages to walk across the room. And the early robots, they would spend ages scanning before they could walk across the room. So when I walked in the room this morning, I didn't look at all the details of the room. I had a sort of a map of a room in my mind, right? And I just used that, right? And so, yeah, I'm not seeing, reality at all. Whereas some people have a condition where they notice everything, right? And so, but that is a disability actually rather than a superpower. So that's very important, and it's important to talk about what your theoretical orientation is, right? But, I think it's absolutely true that each of you here will have a different experience of what happened today, right? And you can see that very clearly with the police example. So that's what we say, they're different. So I've written a paper on that as well for the finance people. So examples of qualitative research, I talked about Littner, the famous guy from Sharp Littner, but he did qualitative research. He did work 70 years ago on what people think, the deep reasoning that goes behind how they pay dividends, and that model is the benchmark even today. There's exciting new journals in qualitative research, and the top journals, as evidenced by the foreword to my book, by the editors of Journal of Finance, they're now doing qualitative research, and so it's poised to get into the FT 50 journals, right? So if you have a topic, you can think about, all the various papers you could do it. If you know the research methodologies, you could first do a systematic review of the topic. You could do, and that's what the experts are telling us. Then you could do a qualitative study, seeing what the real people are thinking, and it might be quite different from the experts, or there might be different emphasis on different things. Then you could do a survey if you want. You could combine the findings from your qualitative with the findings from lit review, and that gives you richer questions to ask. And then you could do either an experiment or a couple of empirical studies. So with the one idea, the one research topic, if you know these different methodologies, you could get 5 papers or more. Could have a whole career. So I talked about the one about surviving the financial crisis. You don't just talk to the people that lost their money. You should talk to the regulators and financial planners. Foster and Warren looked at how managed funds chose their funds manager. Gipple looked at self-managed funds. Lan, who was my Vietnamese student at ANU, she did tuna fishing. And my boat, my identity, is summing up her thesis. Yeah, my boat. And Neck looked at, not how women break through the glass ceiling, but when they do, why do they leave? And a lot of them leave. The men don't leave, but it's quite empowering. They leave because they can. Right? So the men can't. They lose a lot of face. So, certainly in Australia, because you're dealing with human participants, you have to get ethical approval. But, because what we do is considered very low risk, we're just talking to CFOs or market makers, we can go through, there's a higher risk for drug trials, but there's a low risk for the sort of research we do. And that's normally an expedited process. So why do we need this? Well, I'm going to give you, experimental disasters from major universities, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, right? So this one is from Yale, and Stanley Milgram, famous psychology professor, he wanted to test obedience to authority. You remember after the Second World War, a lot of the German generals were, judgment at Nuremberg. They were on trial for the, heinous things that they did. And their defense was, we were just following orders, right? So Milgram wanted to test this out. So the experiment consisted of getting a participant to be a teacher. So if you're the participant, you're the teacher. So in the next room, but you couldn't see them, was a student, and the student was part of the experiment, part of the setup. Yeah, the only participant was the teacher. In the room with the teacher was a person in a white lab coat with a clipboard. Yeah, and they weren't saying anything, but it all looked very official. So the teacher, who was the participant, on the last question, the button said 200, warning, fatal warning. This button will give 240 volts. Oh no, 450 volts. Yeah. And we all know, I'm worried about the recording, and we all know that 110 will kill you. So 450 will fry you. And some of the people said, some of the teachers said, I don't want to do this. But the person in the lab coat looked up and said, it is necessary for the experiment. And have a guess how many of the participants, the teachers, pushed the button, killing the student. 2/3. So, these people would have felt very bad about themselves, right? The participants. So they should have had counselors, etc., on hand, right? Now, the shocking thing about this is when you can't get ethics approval for such an experiment anymore, but when documentaries replicate it, in the modern day, they still get 2/3 of the people pushing the button to kill the student, right? Which is we'd like to think that we wouldn't do that, right? But just a little bit of pressure of authority, and they push the button. Imagine those poor generals, what pressure they were under by the lunatic, Führer, right, back in the day. So it's very interesting to see what ordinary people will do in situations like this. So that's one of the reasons why you need ethics approval. So you don't put participants in a situation like that. So the other two examples from Stanford and Princeton are going to not show up humanity in a good light either. So where to from here? So Pratt has a really good paper on how to write up qualitative research, and we went through some of that here, and also we went through some of the stuff from the Anfara paper. Silverman is an amazing researcher in qualitative research. He's well into his 90s, but he goes all over the world and working with young people, encouraging them and helping them develop their qualitative research. Patton is probably my favorite book, not just because he cites me, but it's a really good book. There's a couple of papers by myself, and of course the book, and most universities will have a course on qualitative methods. And then the new text is what was published last year. You might be able to get a free copy online. Just go and have a look. I'm not sure that people on Zoom can see this. There's a, no, that's right. That's right. That's right. They've got the link there. So in the notes. So there's that book. Okay. So now what we've got to do, we've got a bit of time before we've got to go on to surveys. We are going to do an exercise. Okay, we're going to go to page 396. So page 396, and there's an exercise there. So interviews with a whole lot of teachers. Yeah. So interviews with a whole lot of teachers, and the questions they were asked were, why did you become a teacher? Yeah. So there's over 100 responses. I've pinned it down. I haven't given you the whole interview, but what we want you to do, and Duke, you're going to have to translate this, is to form groups of 5 or so. So all that means is the people in one row just turn around and work with the people behind. So it can be 5, can be 7, can be 8, right? So the people in the front row turn around and work with the people in the row behind you. What I want you to do, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to do, is to go through those responses and come up with 3 reasons why the people become teachers. And what we're going to show you is that all these, because you're triangulating between yourselves and each group, you will come up with 3 things, and each group will come up with 3 things. And I've just got to show you that this works, right? This triangulation between researcher works, because it will have a whole lot of groups, and I bet they all come up with the same 3 reasons. Start now, and I'll tell you when to finish. I'll probably give you 10 minutes.
Are you able to open the book or the link?
Yeah. No, I can open it. Yeah. Oh dear.
I recommend you use your flipbook.
Use the what? I did that. So this is the page we're talking about. So that's on page 397 of the electronic notes. Uh,
396.
396, 397. Duke, they're not turning around doing groups.
Yeah, one. I wait for them first. Right. Bây giờ mọi người đã mở cái trên 306 và 307 rồi. Bây giờ các chị sẽ quay, các chị hàng số 1 quay đối diện nhân yêu thương tình cảm, hàng số 2 mọi người sẽ làm kiến thức. Rồi bây giờ ở đây nè,
And you remember that Yale experiment where the teacher gave the student electric shock? Unless you turn around, I'm going to push the button. Yeah? Ready? Try. You don't want to get electric shock, do you? Try. Watch out. I'm going to push the button. They're not turning around.
I prefer to talk to in the same line. It's okay. Now, this book for them. So it's the online book that they have.
97. Well, you've got to take a long while doing that. What's it? What's it? When I go to 397, there must be a way to show it, did there?
Really quickly. Oh, 373. 397.
397. 397. So you can go up there. I think you just done it. No. Put 397. Here we go.
One here.
No. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because it's in Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Great. Make it bigger. Get rid of this. Yeah. Yep. Perfect.
Bigger.
That's good. It only does one.
Okay.
One size fits all.
Basically,
It's good.
this one. Cuốn sách đến bút mọi người trên 381 đó. Phiên và trên cái có một số cái sách đã in.
Okay, five more minutes, and you've got to appoint someone to be the spokesperson for each group. Yeah.
So you see the yeah, you see the English one.
They want to see the English? Oh, they're not seeing it? Okay. So they're not seeing this?
They see that. So let them see this.
Can I have the tape, please, do? Have the tape? I'm not going to do the fancy. This is our template. So. One on the, one more. One on the side. Oh, you should be using a pen.
Yeah.
You always got to get the where it starts. You've got fingernails. Do it. Okay, 2 more minutes. Make sure the spokesman's got the. Make sure the spokesman's got the 3 reasons.
Từ cái người đại diện của nhóm sẽ phải nói ra 3 lý do.
3 reasons why they become teachers. Become teachers.
3 lý do tại sao bạn đã trở thành giáo viên. Lý do trong này
Where's my teaching assistant from last time? Where's my teaching assistant from last time?
she's in the city.
Are you gonna do this?
I can be your assistant if you want to. Yeah, I write with you.
You just write a little, yeah.
You want to write in the normal pen?
Yeah.
How about I write on the screen? Yeah, I can. I mean, no, I write on the Zoom and then show it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What, in Word or something?
No.
In Word?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah, okay.
I use her.
Yeah, 1 more minute. Then we'll put up your findings on the big screen. Yep, there's the whiteboard, yeah.
So you tell me what to write.
Okay, we'll just do a heading group 1. And try. Do you want to be the spokesman or who's the spokesman for you, group 1? You're going to be the spokesperson? Yep. Yep. Love for children. Love, let's say love working with children. Love working with children. Got that, dude?
The second one is that they enjoy teaching.
Second, enjoy, teaching.
Okay, the last one is they want to have some time for their family.
So children and then enjoy teaching. And flexibility. Everyone is flexibility. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Now, thank you. Group 2. Don't use up my space. We need. Okay, who's the spokesperson for group 2? Look, they're pretending they can't see me. They're just all sitting there. 5 of them. We'll do that later. Group 2? Group 2. We talked to you. You want me to push the button to give you electric shock? Just go and tap one of them on the shoulder.
Okay. All right.
No, aren't they group 2?
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that's good. That's good. Yeah, impact. We'll put impact.
Yeah.
I think that's similar. Yeah, impact.
Yeah.
Yep. 2. Yep, make a difference. That's the same. That's the same. Just give it a tick.
Yeah.
Just give it a tick. A tick. Yeah. Yep. And next one.
The difference is that
Next one is I love to instruct.
What?
I love to instruct.
Okay, love teaching.
love teaching. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Group 3. Yeah, we'll have enough space.
Yeah.
Group 3, you're going to have to go and tap them on the shoulder. They're pretending they can't hear us. Walk down and tap them on the shoulder. Pretending you can't hear us is not working. We should take a microphone. Take a microphone around.
Yeah. I don't know, but I use it for.
I saw a microphone. No, I saw a microphone somewhere. Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay, tell us. There we go.
I love networking with my students, and I love learning new thing in my passion. Learning new thing in my passion.
Learning.
Learning new thing in my passion.
Okay. So she said something about learning and passion. Just get her to repeat it. Get her to repeat it if you haven't heard it. What did she say?
What? Learn.
Just get.
Learning new thing in my passion.
Learning new things.
In my passion, yes.
Okay. So a passion for teaching.
Oh, passion.
For teaching. Just teaching.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one.
And this love of reading. Love of reading.
Reading.
Yes.
Reading.
Just put reading. Tick, tick. Just put tick, tick. Yeah, no, that's what reading. Yeah. Okay, next one.
And making a difference in children's life.
Working with children.
Working with children.
Yeah.
Making difference.
Yep, make a difference. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do one more, but then the other side can do they can give the survey response. So one more.
One more.
Good morning, professors. After discussions, we have 3 reasons why to become teachers. The first one, we have a well-paid job, have a handsome salary. Well-paid job with handsome salary. Yes, I think so. And I think all of you agree with me.
Did you hear?
Handsome salary.
Handsome salary,
Yes.
The
salary.
working conditions, working conditions.
working condition, yeah.
Yep.
The second is we have a big opportunity to improve our knowledge, to broaden our
Okay.
horizons.
Improve knowledge. Yep.
And the last one is flexible schedule.
Flexible.
Yes.
This one.
Thank you.
Yeah, put it down, yeah. Okay, thank you, thank you. So you can see that each of the groups is coming up with very close to the same three. So group one is very, these are, things for society, working with children, enjoy teaching. Flexible is a little bit about yourself. Yeah, that's a little bit about yourself. Group two is impact, love teaching. So that's more about contributing to society. Group three, passion for teaching, working with children, but there's a little bit of an individual there because they get to do reading. Group four is very much about the individual, the salary, the flexible schedule, improving knowledge. This is group four is a bit of an outlier. I've never seen that before because all three things are about the self, the teacher themselves. Normally there's a couple of very, socially minded things, generous things, and maybe one individual thing, right? So, but these, it just shows you that this triangulation within a group works because basically we got the same answer except for this one group here at the end. So we're going to leave qualitative research there, but no, we'll do a break after survey. Yeah, so that'll be our one and only break because we've got to finish at 12. We've got to get things done. So surveys is on page 80. of that is the Campbell and Harvey every year go out and talk to, 2,000 plus CFOs, yeah? And they compare what theory says about corporate finance with what the actual people that are doing corporate finance do. So they first reported on this one in 2001, but they do the survey every year and they put it on their website. So it's a very good, so I don't unmute. So again, is very formal, rigorous and demanding. And so there's what's known as a 80-20 rule. So in carpentry, when you're building a house, the idea is to measure twice and cut once, because you only really get one chance to cut. So you really got to be sure you're getting it right. Well, in survey research, remember I said for qualitative, it could be 30, 50, 70 plus. Survey research, you actually want thousands. Yeah, you want thousands of surveys so you can do your quantitative analysis. So if you're gonna, post out 20,000 surveys or try to, pay someone to get you 20,000 participants, that's going to be a costly, time-consuming exercise. So you only want to do it once and you want to get it right. So instead of, measuring twice and cutting once, you measure 4 times and cut once. Yeah. So in the old days, people thought they could just go out and ask a bunch of questions of market participants and get then a number of papers out of it. But now, it's got to be completely focused on this specific research question and these specific hypotheses. So you can't just use a sample that's out there and say you're testing your hypothesis. The questions have got to be tailor-made for your hypothesis. So different types of surveys, they can be self-administered, like over the internet, and that's the most common method at the moment, right? You go online and do the survey, or it could be sent out in the post, hard copy. Or you could administer it yourself, right? Over the telephone, or you could sit down with the person like you do for an interview, but you're just reading out the questions and responses. Now, I can immediately tell you that how you do the survey could affect the results and probably will. So, you're my students, you did my course, right? If you need to do a survey and you email me and say, Tom, can you please take this survey for me? It helped me in my research. I will say yes, right? I will say yes. But I really don't want to spend the time doing a survey. So if you've got like 80 questions, I'm going to be pulling what's left of my hair out. If you've got like 12 questions, I'll be very happy. But it's only human nature. If I'm doing it online and you ask a question and there's 5 responses, I'm going to read down until I find the first response that seems reasonable and I'm going to tick it, right? I'm not
You can use my phone. You can talk and they can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Just talk.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So we'll get rid of this. X.
Just leave it. You just talk like normal. They
Yeah,
can hear.
but I need to be able to see the screen.
Oh.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay, so we already see how you conduct the survey. That's not coming on the screen.
Then you share.
I'll show it.
Yeah.
Right, let's go.
Can you share the screen again?
Yeah.
Can I go?
We're still recording?
Yeah. Yep.
Want me to have that?
Look like they don't see you. Yeah, they see. Yes.
I got it. Okay. Great. You want me to hold that?
You just talk.
Yeah. Okay, so considerations before you start, right? You need to have, a theory you're testing, a specific hypothesis. You didn't have that for qualitative. You were doing more exploratory, right? Here, because it's quantitative, you need to have a hypothesis. You've got to ask yourself the question, is the survey the right approach to use, right? So you've got to think about that. Maybe it's better to do qualitative. Maybe it's better to do an experiment. Yeah? Maybe it's better to do a capital market type study. What's the target population? How are you going to sample it? Yeah, that's really important. But sometimes it's got to be purposeful. You can't do a random sample and try to find out information about a financial disaster, right? Because most of the population won't have been involved. You can't do a random sample and find out about the effects of flooding and what you should do in advance to try to mitigate, the risks of flooding. You have to do a purposeful. Now, how to ask questions? You think you can ask questions, right? You've been asking questions all your life. But actually, there's a lot involved in asking the question and getting your meaning across. A lot of times you're sure you know what you mean, but the people, the participants really don't understand what you mean. And then you've got to make sure that you have all of the responses that are necessary. Yeah. So, not just, strongly agree or, strongly disagree, but allowing for, the things that this is not applicable to you, it doesn't apply to you, right? So you've got to think about what outcomes are possible. So what scales to use, and I'm not just talking about the scale for each question, where you might have a 5-point Likert scale, which is +2 to -2, or a 7-point, which is +3 to -3. But scales also for abstract abstract ideas, right? Like confidence. So I can't just ask you a question, how confident you are. That's not going to get at how confident you are, right? But what I can do is ask you a series of questions, which combined will tell how confident you are. Same for risk aversion, same for, a lot of things, yeah? So luckily there are tried and true scales available that people can use, and I'll point you to various libraries where you can find these scales. So then you've got to account for biases, right? So one is response bias. We haven't talked about that yet. If DVE sent out a survey to the people that are part of the university, what response rate do you think they would get? So they'd only expect to get about 30%, right? So that's all, only about 30%. If the university sent out a survey to the general population of Danang, they'd only expect to get 10% back, right? So if you wanted 1,000 participants, you'd have to send out 10,000, questionnaires. So here's about asking questions. So this is a very important question, the most important question ever asked. And the question is the answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything. I guess they mean, what's the meaning of life, right? But they've asked this question, what's the answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything? So these are a very advanced race of people on another planet. They build this computer with a specific, and the computer's name is Deep Thought, and the specific purpose of the computer is to answer this question. So they ask the computer the question, and the computer says, yes, I understand. Come back in 7 million years and I'll have the answer, because it took, it's the meaning of life. So 7 million years later, they come back and the computer says the answer is 42. Right? So that's why people say the meaning of life is 42. And the people don't understand, how can you say it's 42? And Deep Thought says, well, you just didn't ask me the right question. You asked me the answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything, but you've got to come up with the right question. You need to build another computer which will help you to come up with the right question. So that's telling you in a funny way, because this is from Douglas Adams, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you click on there, you can see a video showing you that. So now I'm exiting out of that. I'm exiting out of that. And I'm going here. Am I still on? So keep going, Duke. So again, you've got to be careful with the words you use. We already talked about invest versus debt. If you say not allow, people might agree with not allow, but if you say forbid, that's such a final absolute that a lot of people wouldn't agree with forbid.
Recording in progress.
So so you room for you. How is this room? Yeah. Is this room fit for purpose? And what I mean is it fit for you personally? But you might interpret the question as for everyone. Is it fit for everyone? So someone that's handicapped might have trouble getting up on stage or getting down the aisle. So you might answer the question as if the question meant, is it fit for purpose for everyone? Whereas I really meant, is it fit for you, right? I want to know about you personally. Thank you. Come on. So here are some questions, right? So we've got to think about, are these good questions? List up the 3 things you like about your job. I mean, we could ask teachers why they become teachers and say, list 3 things. But then you're not really getting at, you know, any specific hypothesis. We want to really test whether they are doing it because they love to work with children, because of the flexibility, you know, and passion for making an impact, right? So this is not a good question because it's not really testing a hypothesis. It's more exploratory. What industry do you work in? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then other. Well, it doesn't give much choice. It should at least follow the, you know, the 2-digit codes for industry, right, which would be 12, or the 3-digit, which would be 24, right? So it could be a lot more exhaustive. How often do you visit the shopping centre? Well, you know, at our university, there's a train station, right, that takes you to the shopping centre right next to the university. So a lot of students catch the train. On the way from the train to the university, they stop at the shopping centre and get a coffee, something to eat. And then at lunchtime, they walk over to the shopping centre, get some lunch, yeah, and then go back to uni. And at the end of the day, they go get another drink, yeah, at the shopping centre and go home. So they've gone to the shopping centre 3 times a day, but that's not one of the choices. So you've got to be more, you know, exhaustive in your choices. Number the factors you think are important in buying a car. Well, it's a very short and very unusual number of factors, right? So that's not a very good question either, because, you know, probably the make of car, you know, you want a Mercedes or a Porsche, the performance of the car, the color of the car, none of those things are mentioned there. I feel that employees' views have influenced the decisions taken by management. That seems better, but it doesn't tell whether it influenced the manager's decisions positively or negatively. The management might know what the employees want, but they're going to do the opposite, right? Or they might know what the employees want and they're going to do what they want. What is your year of birth? Don't ask that. Don't ask what your year of birth is. People don't like telling you their age. Yeah, you never ask a lady her age. Yeah, so don't ask that. Think of another way to ask, right? And ranges are good. Yeah, so if you have, you know, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 40 plus, you know, or something like that. Think about what your hypothesis is. Do you really need to know specifically the person is 62? Right? No, probably not. So here is a very simple question, but you see the responses are quite complicated, right? How comfortable was your bed? Yeah, and so you can use words, very comfortable to very uncomfortable, or you could use numbers, +2 to -2, yeah? So, but then you add other things. I don't know, you know, I come to Danang and I've met all you wonderful guys. We've gone to the Aussie Bistro. We've watched the big football game, you know, one state in Australia versus another. We've kicked on. I haven't made it home to try the bed. So I don't know, or it's not applicable, right? So you've got to consider, you know, all the potential options. So nominal scale, married, single, single, never married, widowed. Yeah, maybe that's okay. Do you like or dislike chocolate ice cream? Well, I would get more information. Does you really like it or you really don't like it? What knowledge of our services? Well, this is better. I'm getting a better idea of whether you like it or not, because I'm getting, yeah, well, you really have good knowledge versus you have no knowledge. Have you lived in the current address? How long? Well, it's incomplete, isn't it? Right? It's fine up until D, but there needs to be an E, which says 12 plus years. Yeah? So it's an incomplete response. This is better for the age. You know, it's got a range. So people will probably answer this. How many times in the past 7 days did you go to the shopping mall? Well, for the students at my university, they would write down 5 days times 3, 15 times, right? Because they go there on the way, they go on the way home, they go there for lunch. In a whole year's, what's your current age? No, don't ask that. They might stop straight away. No, what do you want to know that? So what scales to use, right? So we saw there you can have this +2 to -2. You can also have +3 to -3 with a 0 in the middle. But that's a single question. But what about if we want to know how risk averse you are, how confident you are, how much anxiety you're facing, right? So then that's quite a complicated, abstract thing, right? Just the same as measuring your IQ or your EQ. So what you'll find is that there are existing scales, so you don't have to, reinvent the wheel. You can use these scales that have been used in previous studies, verified as being appropriate. So you ask then the questions in the scale, and you're able to combine the answers in such a way as to figure out how confident the person is, how risk averse they are, what their IQ is, what their EQ is, what their level of narcissism is, and there seems to be a lot of narcissistic CEOs. So Professor Paul Spector has a library of scales. So if you click on that link there, you'll go to Professor Paul Spector's homepage, and he's got a whole bunch of scales. But even more importantly, he links you to a whole lot of other resources where there's lots and lots of scales. So you'll have just about everything you need if you click on that. So confidence, self-efficacy, stress, coping, environmental worry, EQ, IQ, the list goes on. So anything you can imagine. But you can't just, financial literacy, you can't just ask someone how financially literate you are. You've got to ask them a series of questions which you combine the answers to, and you can figure out how financially literate they are. So biases, right? We already talked about the order effects, right? If you ask the demographic questions first, like the age, they might stop. So you should have them at the end. The other thing is, if it's online, people tend to go with the earlier response. So you've got to mix up the order of the responses. Yeah. If you're doing it over the telephone, people tend to go with the later response. So you should mix up the order of the responses. And indeed, you should mix up the order of the questions, how you ask the questions. So the other huge bias is anchoring bias. So I ask you how much you'd like to save, yeah? How much you'd like to save of your income. And I have on screen, I have a little slider, but it's set at 5%. It's basically just sitting at 5%. Like the lift sits on ground, that's the default. Well, most people just go with the default, right? They just stay at like 5, or they go to 6 or to 4, right? And I'll tell you how strong anchoring bias is. For your retirement income, your whole retirement income, the whole of your second half of your life, in America, the default fund that your retirement goes into is a government bond fund. And that earns somewhere between 1% and 4%. That's the default. Guess what everyone in America does? They're in the default fund. Yeah. And so in Australia, the default fund is fully invested in the market. And that gets about 8 to 10%. Right? Guess what everyone in Australia does? They go with the default, right? So this is a huge decision affecting the second half of your life. And of course, the people in Australia have got to have far higher retirement balances than the people in the US, just simply because of the anchoring bias that you see. And so it's a very, very powerful bias. You couldn't get couldn't get a better example than of that. So common method variance, we asked you the way you ask the question, the online versus the telephone can affect your responses. So that's one thing you got to think about. The other, you know, you might color the answers if you collect both the independent variable and the dependent variable from the same survey. So it's best to get the explanatory factors from one source and the outcome variable from another source. That's an important thing you should think about in advance, you know, when you're measuring the 4 times before doing the survey. Yep, mixing the order of questions, mixing the order of responses. And, you know, if you've got a really serious hypothesis, it might not be evident to the participants what you're trying to get at, right? And that's probably good, because if the participants know what you're trying to prove, they like to give you what you want, right? So the more, you know, you've got a hypothesis that you're testing, and it's, you know, the less clear it is to the participants what answer you're looking for, probably the better, right, to get good results. So these are all things you do in advance. But, you know, when you collected the survey and you're doing your analysis, you can check to see if there's any remaining common method variance, right? And so there's 3 tests here in this video, a single factor test, a common latent factor, and a market variable. So the editor will want to see you talking about common method variance. They'll want to see what you did in advance. So specifically that you mixed up the order of the questions, you mixed up the order of responses, you collected the explanatory variables and dependent variables from different sources. And then they want to see that you then, in addition, once you did the survey, you used one of these tests, one or more of these tests to check to see whether you had any remaining common method variance. So response rate, we said if this university sent a survey to the people in the university, that they'd only get about a 30% response. If they send it to the whole of Danang, they'd only get about 10. Because you've got to apply for ethics, you're only sort of allowed to do, you can ask people to do it, and then you can do one follow-up. You can't keep sending them messages every day. But what can you do? Well, a guy called Heckman got a Nobel Prize for coming up with how to correct for sample selection bias, right? So basically, for that 10% of Danang that responded to your survey, you want to find out what's different from them, compared to a general population. There's obviously something very strange about them, right? Because most people don't do it. So you collect, that's one of the reasons you collect the demographic information. You know about them from what they said in their response, and you can compare them to the members of a general population and see how different they are, right? And from that, you get that comparison of the people who responded to your sample versus the random population. You get what's known as Heckman's lambda. So it's just a variable that essentially tells you the conditional probability that someone would respond to the survey. And then for all your tests, you can include that as an explanatory variable. And if it comes up as significant, then you know you've got a sample selection problem. But if it doesn't come up as significant, then all's clear. Yeah, all's clear. So what do you use online or over the telephone? We already saw that can make a difference, right? You could pay an independent third party. MTurk will go and get participants for you. And so the people that you can go through Google MTurk, but they might be in America, but be happy to work for you for $2.50 an hour, right? So they go and get participants. Research organizations such as Prolific or the Organization of Research University. Some people suggest you can use existing source of data. For example, the OECD did a financial literacy across 195 countries with a minimum participation rate of 1,000 for each. A lot of people go and use that survey when they're dealing with financial literacy, right? But I'd caution you, because remember I told you it's best to have a purpose made survey that's testing your specific hypothesis. And then there's lots of platforms you can use, Lime Survey, Google Forms, SurveyMonkey. It's probably going to depend upon what site license your university or business has. So this is the next example of a major university. So this is my university where I went to do my PhD, Stanford University. So it's Professor Zimbardo, and it's a prison experiment. So, you know, they had an ad, and you've got to get paid $50 to be part of this experiment, right? So, you know, people signed up for it. You know, they were all men, I think. But what happened was, as I was walking to work, working to school, like a van picked up and a bag was put over their head, and they were taken to the basement of one of the university buildings. So some of them were, you know, they were selected to be guards, and some of them were selected to be prisoners, right? They weren't given any specific instruction. But, you know, the prisoners started acting surly, even had a riot about the conditions. The guards started acting very aggressively and mean. And it was only that Zimbardi's fiance come along, and she was talking to this young freshman who was a guard, and he seemed a very nice fellow. But then when the prisoner walked by, she could see that he tripped and pushed the prisoner. And she observed other things like that. So on the drive home that night, she said to Zimbardo, well, look, you've got to stop this, right? Because, you know, this will be traumatizing both the guards and the prisoners. So Zimbardi stopped the experiment. But we would like to think that, you know, if we were a guard, we'd be nice to people, right? And if we were a prisoner, we wouldn't be surly, we'd be, you know, a model prisoner. But it looks like the human condition is different from that, right? We start to act out. Top journals, these are all FT50, Journal of Financial Economics, on, you know, theory and practice of corporate finance, banking services around the countries, corporate culture, another example. Where to from here? Common method variance, you know, the editors are saying you've got to address it. There's a very good primer on surveys. This lady, Stephanie Stanchiva, she is a professor at Yale, and she just wrote this a couple of years ago, a guide to creating, you know, surveys, right? How to run surveys. So that's well worth reading. It'll reinforce what you did today, and it's very, very current. Don Leclerc, my colleague at University of Queensland, about how to ask good survey questions. And this is the paper that started the common method variance. So from 2003, you have to address common method variance because it is important. The way you conduct a survey could affect the results. And a colleague of mine, Martina Lina Luca, she did a paper about executives' engagement with climate science. So your group work is, and this time we're going to ask the groups on this side, is how would you, write the survey questions to find out about why people become teachers, right? So after this, we've got to hypothesize around these are the reasons they become teachers, right? That's our hypothesis. Yeah, out of all the possible hundreds of responses we got, we're going to narrow it down to these ones that the groups have identified. So how would you ask the survey questions here? So think about, you know, how would you ask the question or questions? Yeah, you want to have a go because you saw there how to ask questions. You make sure you've got an exhaustive list of responses. Remember, if you're going to a university and asking, there's some people are teachers and some people are administrators, right? So, you know, you've got to include that in the options, right? Because then, you know, there might not be a teacher, right? They might be an administrator. So why do they, you know, you've got to be very specific about that.
After this exercise, we have a break.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do the exercise.
Yeah.
So you want me to pick randomly?
Yeah, once they've done it, they haven't done it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
How
that-
long you give them? Huh?
5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
How they set up the survey questions?
Yeah, test this these hypotheses.
When the internet drop. Send
16
you.
people. You know, 16, we used to have 16 people. That's only 10, that's it.
Yeah. But the point is when they don't start up to come here, then they have to turn this one on and you talk.
Too complicated.
I don't know the copy.
Mọi người hiểu không ạ? Và bây giờ mọi người sẽ làm một cái thảo luận với nhau để làm ra một cái survey. Cái survey đó nó có những cái câu hỏi để khảo sát những cái vấn đề này. Vấn đề là giả định là các giáo viên họ trở thành giáo viên bởi vì lý do mà mọi người sẽ tập ở trên. Bây giờ là làm thế nào để ra cái câu hỏi ra cái bạn khảo sát và đáp ứng là tạo ra được cái bạn hypothesis này. Còn năm nữa.
What's going on here, Duke? No, here, I can't.
Sorry.
No, I'm trying to get this to work. Duke, you're not understanding. Duke, where's Ruby? Ruby, can you come? Duke doesn't understand me. I'm trying to get word to it. I become a teacher. It's not typing.
Oh, okay.
Where's it?
Oh, it's okay. Because it's too small.
Oh,
So you make it bigger.
oh, I'm trying to make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you can
Okay,
try now.
okay.
Yeah.
I always-
They
like
don't
this.
see your screen now.
Oh, share.
Yeah, you share. You try. So I wonder if you're talking, then they still can hear. So maybe you just share the screen. The online participant can hear you.
Okay, it's not doing the out.
What? Yeah, just the laptop thing on.
It's not doing well.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Not until they start. Not until they start. Yep, I'm having this first and have the different tastes. Okay, 1 minute.
Còn 1 phút nha. 1 phút xong mình thảo luận cái này rồi mình về nhé. Có gì hay là thôi. Là không học. Tức là các bạn hỏi cái phần systematic literature review thì February là có học 2 ngày thì sẽ xin đi ra cái YouTube của cái việc của study tại không tuần rồi thì đây nè theo kiểu gì nhé chị biết rồi chị có ly rồi đợi cuối giờ nghỉ trưa thì nếu các bạn nào có muốn ý định muốn sở hữu một cuốn sách in của thầy để học lại những cái chương mà hôm nay thầy không có qua thì có thể liên lạc lịch với còn dưới sách dày 500 trang có 8 chương thì bạn nào muốn hôm nay thì nhờ thầy ký tên chụp hình luôn đấy còn mình thấy ở đây ôi đấy giờ nghỉ trưa rồi đó. Alright, you think we should start? But how you want me to run? How you want me to help you run the section?
Yeah. You asked that group, yeah.
So, what question should I ask? Do I need to write?
What do they come up with? That's all right.
The survey question.
Yeah,
They explain how they design the survey.
Yeah, what questions they ask.
Okay.
What question? Or questions?
Alright. Now we have a discussion. Each group will tell me one survey questions that you will ask the participant so that to be able to address those hypotheses that you have learned, that you have.
So we're testing the hypothesis. So how would you test the hypothesis that these are the reasons that people become teachers? Okay, how did you do the questions?
Hello everyone. I will the questionnaire. First, in our questionnaire will be we have 3 sessions. The first session,
yep.
the first session will be the participant information. Participant information is about the gender, the age of the.
I would have that at the end because people mightn't want to give you that information, so they might stop the survey there. So I would have that at the end. Yeah. Important thing. You don't want to lose the people straight away. Yeah.
And then we move to the main session. Will be we list all of the reasons why they become a lecturer, and in order to measure the important factor, we use the Likert.
For each one, you'd have a scale.
A scale of Likert from 1 to 5. 1 will be strongly disagree, and 5 will be strongly agree.
Okay.
So that could be the method how we measure the main factor how to become a lecturer. Yeah, thank you.
Now we would like.
Okay, so this is what I think they said, right? So I become a teacher because I love working with children. Yeah. So underneath it, you've got a scale, strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. That's what the dots mean, that you're filling it in. And then for the next one, we're going through this list. I become a teacher because I like the flexibility. And you do the same for each of these, but then finally, you would say, I become a teacher for other reasons. Once we did all of these, and there might be 5 to 8 of the reasons here. Finally, you would ask a question for, if that wasn't one of the reasons, might be something we missed, so I become a teacher for other means. The other thing you could do is to say, put all, I become a teacher, and rank the following. You could say, rank the following, have all of these as reasons, and get them to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? But we're capturing this here because we can see how many say strongly agree to each of those questions. So that, that's 2 approaches to doing it, to finding out why they become a teacher. Okay, let's take a break.
All right, okay. How long, Tom?
Half an hour till 10:40.
No, half hour too much.
Okay, till 10:30. 10:30.
10:30
Yeah, till 10:30.
Mình sẽ nghỉ đến 10 giờ 30 nha. Sau đó thì mình sẽ học lại 10 giờ 30 đến 12 giờ là mình sẽ xong. Cái phần thứ hai các anh chị rất là quan trọng, đó là bác Tom sẽ chia sẻ cái góc nhìn của một tổng biên tập của tạp chí Journal Accounting Literature, là một tạp chí được xếp hạng A của ABDC list, là của Australia Business Dean Council. Thì bác sẽ chia sẻ là những cái người tổng biên tập á, editor đó, họ sẽ look for những cái yêu cầu gì, và tại sao là bài của mọi người 90% bài gửi lên là bị desk reject, có nghĩa là ném vô scrap. Thì editor họ nhìn cái gì ngay từ cái giây phút đầu tiên để họ quyết định là gửi bài đi cho phản biện hay là bỏ, coi như là gửi thư reject liền. Thành ra là mọi người nhớ cái Đức đã học ngồi cái section đó rất là nhiều lần, thì Đức có những cái gì đó, tất cả những cái gì mà bác có thể chia sẻ được, bác đều chia sẻ hết, nên mọi người nhớ quay trở lại nha. Rồi mời các anh chị qua phòng bên để giải lao cho đầu óc thư giãn.
Do I need a password here? Do I need a password for the internet? Just like that? I'm not connected.